So just a little bit about corn shellers. If you're growing a reasonable amount of corn with the effort of, actually using it for feed or to feed yourself, you're going to have a whole lot of corn, which can be really tedious to shell off by hand, although traditionally that was what was done by Native Americans and stuff, and you can do that. But this is a very simple device that makes it a whole lot easier. I'm hoping I can do this one-handed. So here is a little bit of my flint corn that I have run out of. Here's a nice little ear of, well, my flint. It's probably not all potato, but it's got a lot of potato influence. Not that that matters. So you stick it pointy end down into the corn sheller and you grab onto your crank, and then basically this knobbed cast iron wheel is turned by the crank, and the corn is drawn down and spun against the sort of knurls there on the side of this lever arm, until it gets down to the base plate there, and then the turning turns it and then shoves it back up here and releases it, and then it's clean. And this is the way I like to set it up. I have just this little box, and then I have a bag underneath that to catch the grain. The downside of this is when you have we had a drought, and my corn, the flint tends to be on the small side anyway, and so I got a lot of little nubbiny pieces like this. There's still a lot of good food there. I still run it through the corn sheller, but they will do this to you. Oh, he's jouncing around. Okay, so he's going through the corn sheller, and then he falls out right there. See, that sucks, but it's still a great tool, and the cobs are not difficult to get out of the corn after you're done with this. You just shake the bag a little, they all float to the top because of physics, and then you can deal with them. So, and if you're looking for one of these, I have a little bit of advice. I bought this on eBay, and at certain times you can find just a ton of these on eBay. 30, 40 of them will be for sale, and the price will not be that bad. I paid about 30 bucks for this, and there's just not a lot to them. And the thing about them, this is a very old piece of equipment. This is probably almost 100 years old, possibly. They made tens of thousands of these. Every little farm everywhere in North America had one of these. And they're a small piece that pretty much sits in the shed or in the barn after people stop using them, and so there's not a lot to go wrong with them. And so there's literally millions, well, probably not millions, but there are a huge number of these sitting out available. This is not a rare antique, is what I'm trying to say. So don't get suckered into paying a huge amount of money for one, because they're not rare, they're not precious, they're not sacred, okay? You shouldn't spend more than $25 to $40 for a perfectly conditioned corn sheller. And they actually still make them new. There's one that I saw online, it's all painted up. It's called the Maximizer trademark. They must be just trademarking Maximizer, because this design is like 150 years old. There's no way they've got a patent, and it's identical. It's pretty much identical to this design. And then I did see another new one, which is basically a dumbed down modern version, where it's just all of these parts, this tube and this tube are just like some steel stampings, and then there's the only cast iron part is the wheel, the knobby wheel here, which might even be cast aluminum. I would say don't get that, because that one's dumbed down and it doesn't have this tension mechanism. See, and this is nice because it squeezes the corn up against that plate, that spring, and you can release this springs. Because the other thing to think about, if you're growing corn, like I grow a flour corn, when I shell my flour corn off, I take the tension all the way off, because it if you have it really tight the way I do for my flint corn, it will actually chew up a bunch of the kernels because flour corn has soft endosperm. So that's something to think about. These are adjustable, and there's a ton of them out there. Don't buy some new modern re-envision of the same tool with less functionality, which is, that steel one is junk. I mean, I can look at it and tell that it's junk compared to this. And there's nothing to go wrong with these unless somebody dropped them and cracked the castings. And that maximizer looks, probably it's made in China. Nothing wrong with China. I mean, the Chinese invented cast iron. It's identical. It's essentially this identical design. So I would be perfectly comfortable with it, but it's like 60 bucks. 60, I wrote it down. $69.99 was what I just found. And so that's pretty pricey. You ought to be able to find one of these for way cheaper than that. And I actually saw one for $259.95. Do not pay $100 for a corn sheller. That's crazy. And that modern one is 43 bucks. It might look tempting, but it's a piece of crap. Wait and get one of these. There's millions of these out there. So one thing also to keep in mind is when you're growing open pollinated corn, especially like I was talking about with the flour corn, and you have soft endosperm that's easily damaged by these knobs. You want to select your corn for easy shelling. Like this corn, this ear right here, which is I think partially some Cusco, but it's got a lot of bright orange stuff, so it's also got, there's a bunch of stuff going on in this corn. These are all hybrid mutts, but you can actually easily shell that off by hand. But that does still get hard on your hands after a while because the little scar where the silk attached, the silk scar, it's like a little tiny point, and you don't really feel it, but it starts to wear your skin off. So that's why this is. Whereas this guy, Cateto, this is pretty close to a pure Cateto ear. Very difficult. See, I was trying to shell it off and I actually snapped the cob. You just, those kernels don't want to come off by hand. So easy shelling is something to select for. Yeah, that's pretty much corn shellers. The other good setup for putting these boxes together is to, if you don't want to do this little box with the bag, the other thing people do is they'll do like a great sort of a large bin, kind of like maybe even a little bigger than this plastic bin, and then attach the sheller to the side of it and then shell the corn out into the bin, and then it's really easy to pick out the little cob bits and stuff, and but then you have to pour your grain into the bag later. I like to just go straight into the bag, and then I sort the corn when I'm, you know, ready to cook it. It takes like 2 seconds to like pick out any cob bits, and you know, and then since mostly I nixtamalize the corn, turn it into tortillas, I, you know, like don't worry as much about having little bits of corn silk, or you know, like the corn silk, or you know, even little bits of husk, because when you nixtamalize, that stuff all gets sort of dissolved by the alkali and washes off because you're rinsing the corn multiple times, and that stuff all comes out in the wash basically. So I don't worry so much about having clean corn. But if you're like making stuff more like cornbread, maybe you want to use the big box style to hook your corn sheller up. But just, everyone should have one of these, but don't pay too much for one.